Hey guys, so of course we had YCS Indianapolis over the last weekend, so as usual I wanted to provide a breakdown of the most played hand traps and staples among those topping deck lists that were available to help you prepare your deck list for your next events. And as always, definitely go check out my discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Sleeves as well as singles, links in the description down below. Also, as always, a big thanks to YGOProduct.com for having all of the deck lists readily available for me to be able to do the analysis. And of course, this is what the top cut breakdown looked like, and a big thanks to the Card Launcher Store for creating these amazing visuals as always. So unfortunately, Snake Eye did take up a vast majority of the top cut despite that ban list, so you know, a little bit disappointing to see in that regard, but hopefully there will be a ban list. Even before NAWCQ, it's doubtful, but it would make it pretty chaotic. And of course, the winner of the event was Paulo, so definitely go check out his YouTube channel as well. I'll have that link down below. Alright, so let's just do a quick overview of the hand traps. And so in the main deck, it was a median of 13.5, which is technically lower than the last event in YCS Rio. It was actually around 15, but nonetheless, this is still incredibly high. Like usually we're at around 9. And so right now, you know, you have decks like Tenpai, you have decks like Snake Eye that can fit so much non-engine, and that's kind of the theme we've been going towards to begin with. And so now we're kind of like at that extremes. And then in terms of the side, a median number of 3, which is about the same as last month as well. In terms of going second board breakers, that went up a little bit in the main deck instead, from about 1.5 last event last month in Rio to about 3, and in the side that also went up a little bit more as well, leaning towards a little bit more board breakers this time around. So as always, let's just cover the most played hand traps and staples, and to be honest with you, at least for hand traps, the order has not really changed that much since the last month I did this for Rio. I mean, we're basically in the same format still, of course. Imperm being number 1, I mean, hand trap, or rather, sorry, monster effect negation kind of hand traps, pretty popular right now. Imperm, of course, nice to play around talents. Ash Blossom, it's, I mean, if you're playing a lot of hand traps, you might as well play Ash. It's just generic of them all, can hit pretty much everything, maybe sometimes not as high impact, but still worthwhile to have if you can play it. As I mentioned, Valor, effect negation cards, even Ghost Runner, you'll see later. Nibiru is still seeing a decent amount of play, especially in the main deck, and of course, because most of the top cut is Snake Eye, but after Snake Eye, Nibiru technically isn't actually that great, right? Against Tenpai, it's not going to be that amazing. When I surveyed the Melodious players, which you can check out that video, they did not respect Nib at all either. Of course, against something like Voiceless Voice, for the most part, doesn't really come up as well, and you know, let's say even like at tier 2 level, you have something like branded Despia. Nibiru can do something sometimes, but for the most part doesn't really. So just keep in mind, it's really just there because of Snake Eye, and of course Ghost Mourner as well. And then we have Ghost Ogre, which is something that has been a little bit more popular lately because, of course, Tenpai Dragons, if they do have to use that search effect of the field spell, then Ghost Ogre will be pretty effective there. And again, something like, let's say, Ubel or even Voiceless Voice, they have a lot of continuous spells or traps that this can come up as well. And then you have even something like Melodious, this can come up in terms of, like, I guess, like the refrain, like the scale effect, or even something, the one that fuses, you can also pop that away. You have Bestials that are pretty popular in this side deck against Snake Eye, you know. You have something like IP that you can get rid of. Magma in particular is of course a little bit more popular in Tenpai Dragons because it can just search any of their dragons as well for follow-up, because they are going second, and even for branded decks as well, which of course only one top, but you know, they also have a couple different targets outside of Bestials that they can search off of this as well. But you know, of course, you know, something like, let's say, Voiceless Voice, Bestials still good against that. Against Melodious, they're all light, so that can also be good. Against Tenpai themselves, obviously not really, because they're not really light or dark, they're I think mostly fire, so nonetheless, you know, as a side option, still comes up. Ghost Ball is not like, it's not amazing, but it still has application against a lot of different strategies. So again, if you have the space to play a lot of hand traps, Ghost Ball can be one of those options. Droll, on the other hand, definitely back-to-back events now, really not seeing that much play. So this is something that can sometimes be a little bit concerning, because when you see a decline in Droll, then you can see some pesky, really scary going first stacks kind of sneak in a top or two. Like, let's say, for example, Vanadium was a common example. Even Dark World last event, I believe, topped because, you know, something like Droll isn't around, but nonetheless, definitely a little bit on the back burner right now. And then you have something like DD Crow, which is still good, similar to, like, let's say, Ghost Spell against like Tenpai. They do tend to like revive from the grave, so you can kind of get rid of that. DD Crow also is nice because you can also banish like spells or traps, which can always come up against a lot of different strategies as well. And then moving on to the staples, we have Talents as number 1 now. This is something that, you know, I personally have been putting on my ban list, wish list for quite some time, at least till 1. It is very strong. You do punish your opponent for hand trapping you, take away another card, and right now, kind of like these kind of stealing cards, as you'll see a little bit later in the video, very, very popular. You also have Crossout, which is very popular in a hand trap format, but also when you have and expect a lot of mirrors, which especially at a YCS level event, you're going to see something like Crossout more. Of course, the infamous Crossout on Skill Drain by Paula is something to remember. And then Droplet is another popular one right now as kind of like your board-breaking monster negation card on top over Dark Ruler. It's a quick play, which makes it a little more flexible, especially going against something like Tenpai, which of course did not have an impressive showing at YCS Indy, but it is something that can be relevant, especially when you're not really sure if they're going to make you go first or second post side. Sometimes they do switch it up, so it's kind of nice against Melodious as well. They do kind of have weakness to something like Droplets or even Dark Ruler and Eclipse and Super Poly. Next we have Skill Drain. Unfortunately, this is pretty popular. You also had a couple stun decks at top, so they're going to be playing this regardless, but you have Snake Eye decks that are going to be siding this, for example, because you know what, even if it affects you, as long as it affects your opponents more, which it will if you're the one that went first, Skill Drain is still going to be pretty strong. Hopefully this is another floodgate that they will kind of handle on the next ban list. And then we have Cosmic Cyclone. This was very popular. I think the most popular staple last event in YCS Rio. It's still really good. Really comes up against every deck, right? I mean, Snake Eye, any of their monsters in the spell trap zone, you can banish that away. Again, something like Tenpai, their field spell, getting rid of that is very critical. Voiceless Voice, as I mentioned, they have a lot of continuous spells and traps. Even something like, let's say, Branded, against Branded Loss, like getting rid of that can be very good. And so it's really flexible and just comes up against pretty much every deck. And then you have Feather Duster, really nothing much to say here. Same with Call by the Grave, just kind of generic staples you kind of expect in a lot of decks. D-Bearer fell down a little bit compared to last month, but it's still pretty popular. And again, as I always say, it's just really good right now because it just hits a lot of key decks because we are actually, we have a lot of synchro strategies, or let's say Ritual, you have Fusion, and just a lot of things that you can call with this one. And then as I mentioned, Change of Heart and Mind Control was actually seen in 7 of the 26 lists. Pretty interesting because Mind Control, I don't really recall see that much play until maybe before it got limited in the first place. I believe it was around early 2020. I remember this was a card that people were considering also, especially when Verdant Anaconda just kind of came out around that March time period. And as long as you have like one monster of your own, just take another monster, slap on an Anaconda, and bring out Dragoon or something like that. I thought that was where it kind of saw or potentially would have seen play, but it did get limited around that same time frame as well. And then in terms of the most common generic extra deck monsters, SP, really not that surprising. And you have something like, let's say for example, Appaloosa. This is definitely a big potential candidate for being banned on the next list, as we saw something like Barone and Savage getting banned. So I'm sure this will be on the chopping block pretty soon, especially because of how easy it is to bring out. Technically, Hida and Promethean Princess were also seen in 18 lists, but I just decided to say, well, that's technically more for fire specific decks and maybe not as generic as some of the ones listed here. And lastly, moving on to the quote-unquote tech choices, Metaltronus. So this one, it's not new, right? We have been seeing this even among Dueling Book replays on DB Grinder's channel before leading up to this event. I guess it's just mainly for like the mirror that you're gonna have this come useful. And then another funny one I saw was Soul Absorption, because this was seen in a Runic Stun deck, and I didn't really see a topping Stun deck play this at least yet. I'm sure it's been seen play before, but I just thought it was funny because it's a really old card. I still remember having this in my bulk back when I was a kid, and I guess it's just anytime the Runic card is banished, I guess you just gain life. So that's just another way to win in time if you're not already decking them out. Anyways, guys, that was it for the breakdown of the most played hand traps and staples at YCS Indianapolis. Hopefully that was helpful in terms of helping you prepare your next main deck, side deck, as you prepare for your next event this coming weekend. So big thanks to all of you for watching. Huge thanks to my patrons as always for the continued support, and well, take care, guys.